I have to tell you something, guys. I am fired up and excited about this year in general. Simply because in 2019, next week, my wife and kids are moving to the States. And I'm going to be left in Norway just for a few months. Excited about that as well. As I prepare for myself to move to the land of the free, America. United States of America. I'm fired up about that. I've lived in Norway now for pretty much my entire life, with the exception of 3 years. I've lived in Norway for 30 years. Now, people say that it's a socialistic country. Other people say that no, it's a market economy. I just have to explain to you what I experience as a socialistic country. Because I've lived here, I know. And I want to spend this time to explain a little bit more about the difference between capitalism and socialism, because there's a lot of kids growing up these days not knowing truly what the difference is, and people are enticed by socialism when in my opinion it's completely the opposite of where you want to go. So I just want to explain first why I'm fired up about going to the States. Well, just one example. We drive. I drive a lot. I love to drive. Not necessarily because I love cars. It's mostly because I just love the flexibility, being able to go wherever I go, whenever I want to. And in America, you basically have to have a car in order to, get places. Well, let me tell you that the gas prices in America are literally a quarter of the price of Norwegian gas prices. A quarter, 25% of the price that we pay in Norway is what you pay in America. And the interesting part is that it's not because the diesel or the gas is more expensive in Norway. It's not. It's because they're taxed. It is heavily taxed in Norway. Like almost, I think it's 70 to 80% of what you pay on your petrol in Norway is taxes. And then you've got income tax. And then you've got value-added tax on all products that you purchase. 25% on everything except for food, which is 15%. And then you have taxes on buying cars. And you have taxes on just everything. It's insane. People say that, you pay approximately between 30 and 40% in taxes. Normal 35%. No. In Norway, you pay between 65 to 70% in taxes when you calculate everything included. Okay, I'm not talking about just your income tax. I'm talking about every single aspect where the government can tax you, they will tax you. And I'll explain to you why they tax you and why there's an exponential growth curve towards socialism and eventually communism, even though people are beginning to understand that socialism doesn't work, so they try to steer away from it. But at the same time, people are also beginning to vote, like kids are beginning to vote for communist parties as well, and it's insane. Are you seeing what's going on in Venezuela? Are you seeing what has been going on in Cuba? Have you seen what Soviet Union did for years and years? Have you seen what happened in China? The only reason why Russia and China are working a little bit more today is because they've adopted capitalistic trends. And it's the same with Norway and the rest of the Scandinavian countries. The only reason why some of this is actually working, one, is because our population is drastically lower, so it's actually possible to handle all these people. But also the second part is that they've adopted more and more some capitalistic aspects in the economy. But what's interesting is that when you have this half and half thing going on, is that you end up having a big government, tons of politicians whose leaders, by the way, the political leaders, are making way more, sometimes double the amount of what a normal privatized company is paying their top leaders. For what? For creating laws that many people don't obey in general because there's just too many laws? That's what happens in socialism. What happens is that you basically create a bunch of laws because you want to protect the people from big corporations or from generally anyone who wants to sell something, because you care about the people who purchase stuff. Or and you for example, you make it a law that you need to have a minimum wage. Fortunately, in Norway, we don't have a minimum wage. That's one of the positive things I have to say. But in general, they create a bunch of laws simply because there's a bunch of politicians. And what happens is that the critical laws, like murder, rape, all the other things that are going on, things like that is not, like, they try to prioritize it, but they can't prioritize it because they have to prioritize the war on drugs. They have to prioritize a bunch of other stuff. There is so much going on, and the police has no capacity to take care of all the stuff that's going on. And so you end up having tons of cases where they just basically write you a letter and say, basically, sorry, we're not able to continue this case because we don't have capacity. That's what happens most of the time if it's small cases for the police. They just don't have capacity. And why don't they have capacity? Is because there's too many laws and the government is spending and wasting the people's money. Just like Margaret Thatcher said, you will always run out of other people's money. That's just a fact. It's because it's not your money. The thing is that when people become politicians, they're academics. They've gone to university and then they get into office. They're not business owners. They've never tried and struggled and been rejected and all those things that business owners have to go through. They simply end up in office in the parliament, and then they create laws. And they try to understand the economics of things, and they try to negotiate laws and how things should work together with the big corporations. And what ends up happening is that the big corporations are getting tax benefits and loopholes. Sometimes that's great because it provides jobs and all those things. But other times they make it so that the huge corporations become monopolies. And they stay monopolies because there's no competition. The reason why there's no competition is because all the small companies that want to compete can't, because they don't have the resources needed to understand all of the laws. The government suddenly changes a law, boom, that company is out of business. They change the tax rules, boom, a small company is out of business. But the big corporations, guess what? They can afford lawyers who understand the laws or who spend all of their time studying the laws, and then who can give good counsel to the people who run the big corporations. So you end up having this crooked capitalism that's not capitalism. Capitalism is in a free market where the market chooses the prices. And if there's a lot of competition, the prices will always come down. And if there's a lot of competition for workforce, then the salaries will go up. In socialism, it's the opposite way around. You've got salaries going up a little bit. Salaries will always go up because of inflation. But the prices double compared to how much your regular wage increase. Well, so what ends up happening is that you get less purchasing power. The products' prices should be going down. But in socialism, because you have minimum wage, because you have all these other regulations and things that the corporations have to do and keep track of, and they have to pay their people more and more and more, prices increase and the buying power of the average person goes down. Eventually, you get unemployment because companies don't want to hire because there's too many regulations when it comes to workers, and you end up having a country that has the problems of Venezuela. Now, that is an extreme case, yes, but that is possible in any socialistic country if the people, especially the youth, try to adopt the mindset that you should get everything for free. There's a huge problem with that mentality. Yes, everyone wants freedom, but it comes at a price, and you as an individual have to pay that price through you taking personal responsibility over your own life. And we will use voluntarism to provide for the poor, needy, and desperate who need our help. 95% of the people everywhere in the world are good people who strive and struggle for themselves, for their families, and for society at large. And you've got 5% who basically don't care, do their own thing, and don't, who are almost suicidal. You can think of it like that. Who are depressed and they don't want nothing to do with society in general, and they might not even be good people. Guess what? They're just 5%. 95% are good people who want to help others, but they simply, in a socialistic structure, have no capacity to do so. What's happening in America right now, and I want to go over there, help them out to understand that socialism does not work, and help them to see the broader picture for the younger generation, because the younger generation are basically growing up thinking that socialism can work in America. Speaking to my friend this morning who does live in the States, but who came from Germany 6-7 years ago, moved to the States, and he's talking about the healthcare situation in America, which is crazy because they spend twice as much as the next country in the world on healthcare, and yet the premiums that people have to pay, the insurance premiums on healthcare, are like insane. And the reason why it's so high, and it's almost sometimes, as you know, if you want to have really good coverage, you might have to spend the same amount that you spend on food for an entire month. You have to spend that on an insurance policy, which is ridiculous. But the reason why is because the government cannot make their minds up to choose. Either we go full out Scandinavian country and we provide healthcare for everyone, and we make healthcare government owned. There's going to be a lot of problems, a lot of issues when it comes to that if they do that. But it will be cheaper than what they're doing right now, which is basically the huge debate whether it should be free or not. And they can't make up their decision. Or you completely leave it, make it privatized completely, and voluntary to buy healthcare, and get the prices down. Get the regulations off of the healthcare so that people can choose themselves what they want, and you open up for competitors and competition. That's what's necessary in the States. Anyway, the reason why socialism doesn't work, the main reason, and I hope you've continued until this space in this video because this is the most important aspect. Socialism will never, ever work simply because it is based on force. It is based on coercion. And it is based on emotional instability. Because the moment something bad happens, you ban something for the entire people. Just because one event happened. One stupid person created an event, and then the politicians are like, oh, crazy, we have to ban this for everyone. And everyone is not going to do what that person did. It's based on force. And force comes because they believe that people cannot take care of themselves. That's not how we go about it. force takes away the opportunity to educate people. When you force someone to do something, they don't educate themselves. They don't take personal responsibility, and they will eventually just simply blame you and blame you as the government for their problems. And yet it's not the government's fault, really. It's the individual's fault for voting socialism into parliament. Is capitalism a lot better? Capitalism is based on individual responsibility and voluntarism, win-win situations, as long as people are honest. That's what's necessary in capitalism for it to work. And in true capitalism and libertarianism, where the police get the funds necessary from donations, and it's the only tax necessary, it's 5% of what we pay in taxes today. In Norway, 5% would be enough to cover a national defense police with tons to spare if it was 5% of what we have today in taxes. They would have lots of capacity to handle dishonest people in capitalism, and it would be a completely different aspect. I love capitalism. I love voluntarism. I love win-win situations. I love men taking full responsibility for themselves, for their families, and for society at large. This is the Men of High Value channel. Make sure you subscribe to this channel because there's so much more to this. If you just go through the videos, you'll understand. We talk about politics. We talk about semen retention. We talk about entrepreneurship. We talk about finances. We talk about anything that helps you to become the masculine man that your woman and your kids deserve. And much more to come. This is the Men of High Value channel. My name is Joseph Darling. I'll see you again tomorrow.